March 23, 1943, near the Ousseltia Valley, Tunisia, late afternoon. Dust hangs in the air like a curtain that refuses to fall. A German staff car sits half-hidden beneath a stand of scrub olive trees, its engine ticking softly as it cools. Nearby, Generalmajor Fritz Bayerlein, Chief of Staff to Generaloberst Hans-Jürgen von Arnim, steps out of the heat and into the thin shade. His uniform is crisp despite weeks of retreat. Maps are tucked under one arm. A pair of binoculars hangs heavy against his chest. The sounds of battle are distant now. Artillery thumps rolling like far-off thunder, the occasional rattle of machine gun fire echoing from the hills. This part of Tunisia has become a maze of collapsing fronts, broken units, and desperate improvisation. Then Bayerlein hears it, an engine. Not the heavy growl of a German staff vehicle, something lighter, faster, reckless. The sound grows louder, bouncing off the rocky slopes. A Willys MB Jeep bursts into view along the dirt track, olive drab, mud-splattered, windshield down. Two American soldiers ride casually inside, one hand on the wheel, the other resting on a Thompson submachine gun, as if this were a training exercise back in Georgia. They don't see the Germans until it's too late. A shouted command. Rifles snap up. The Jeep skids, fishtails, and stalls in a cloud of dust. Silence. The Americans raise their hands. The Jeep rolls to a stop just meters away from Bayerlein. For a long moment, no one moves. Then the general steps forward. He is not angry, not triumphant, only curious. This war has taught him to be. The Jeep is unremarkable at first glance. Small, open, unarmored. The kind of vehicle German officers have long dismissed as crude. A mechanic's car, some call it. Useful, perhaps, but hardly impressive. Bayerlein circles it slowly. You can almost feel the heat radiating off the metal, smell the oil, hear the wind tugging at the canvas straps. One of his officers begins searching the prisoners. Another lifts the hood. And that's when something changes. Inside the Jeep are maps. Not folded scraps or outdated sketches, but laminated, updated, clearly printed maps covering vast stretches of Tunisia, each marked with unit symbols, supply routes, grid references, fresh intelligence. There's a radio mounted neatly behind the seats, wires secured, headset hanging ready. Not a bulky command set, but something light, portable, designed to work on the move. Then they open the rear. Jerry cans, full, not one, several. Boxes of K-rations, still sealed, chocolate, cigarettes, coffee, enough food for days. Spare parts, tools, extra ammunition. Everything clean, everything standardized, everything ordinary. Bayerlein doesn't say a word. He kneels, picks up one of the maps, and studies it closely. The paper is thick, durable, designed for rain, sweat, and mud, designed for war. This isn't a special operations vehicle. This is just normal. That realization settles quietly and heavily. For years, German officers have believed in superiority through excellence, better training, better tactics, better soldiers. War, they believe, is decided by brilliance at the point of contact. But this Jeep doesn't speak of brilliance. It speaks of systems, of factories that produce identical vehicles by the tens of thousands, of supply chains that ensure fuel, food, radios, and ammunition arrive together, always together, of an army where even the smallest unit moves with information, communication, and endurance. Bayerlein straightens. He looks again at the Jeep, at the two Americans, calm, sunburned, barely rattled. One of them is chewing gum. Somewhere in the distance, German artillery fires again. Another line collapses, another retreat begins. And for the first time that day, the general feels something colder than fear. He feels certainty, because this Jeep didn't get lost. It wandered here because it could afford to, because behind it lies an industrial continent that treats logistics not as a limitation, but as a weapon. Bayerlein hands the map back to his officer. Secure everything, he says quietly. But his eyes remain fixed on the Jeep. He already knows this was not a lucky capture. It was a glimpse behind the curtain. And once you've seen how the enemy truly fights, not with heroics, but with endless, relentless support, you cannot unsee it. The sun dips lower over Tunisia. The dust begins to settle, and with it, a terrible understanding starts to take shape in the mind of a German general. If this is what an American Jeep carries, what must be following behind it? The Jeep is towed off the road as dusk bleeds into night. Bayerlein walks beside it in silence, boots crunching over gravel, his mind no longer in Tunisia, but racing backward through the war, Poland, France, Russia. All the moments when German speed and daring shattered enemies who seemed larger on paper. Those victories had trained him to see war a certain way. This Jeep is rewriting that understanding. They stop near a temporary command post, little more than a camouflage tent and a cluster of vehicles scavenged from 3 different units. A field lamp flickers on. The captured equipment is laid out on a folding table. Maps, radio, fuel, food, tools, side by side like an inventory list made real. An officer begins speaking, explaining where the Americans were likely headed, which unit they belonged to, how they might have strayed so far forward. Bayerlein barely listens. He is studying the radio, not the technology itself. Germany has radios, excellent ones, but how casually it is integrated. No special truck, no dedicated signal detachment, no waiting for headquarters approval. This Jeep can talk to artillery, to aircraft, to rear supply depots. It can move, fight, call for help, resupply, and keep moving, all without stopping. You can almost hear the gears turning in his head. In the Africa Corps, radios are precious. Fuel is rationed like blood. Maps are hoarded, revised by hand, passed down carefully, then lost when a unit is overrun or forced to burn its papers. Every German movement is a negotiation with scarcity. The Americans, it seems, negotiate with abundance. One of the officers opens a ration box, half curious, half amused. He pulls out a small packet of instant coffee. "Coffee," he says incredulous, "in the field." A few men laugh softly. Bayerlein does not, because coffee means morale. It means alert drivers. It means soldiers who can push through the night without slowing. It means endurance engineered, not hoped for. He remembers the winter outside Moscow, men huddled in frozen trenches, weapons jamming, supply columns bogged down in snow and mud. Courage could not melt ice. Discipline could not replace fuel. Only logistics could, and Germany had already spent too much of it. A messenger arrives with news from the front, another retreat, another request for fuel that cannot be fulfilled. The general nods, issues orders, watches the man disappear into the dark. Then he turns back to the Jeep. This single vehicle represents something terrifying. Not American courage, not American tactics. American depth. Factories that run day and night. Railroads untouched by bombers. Oil fields and ocean away from enemy guns. Shipyards producing cargo vessels faster than Germany can sink them. An army that doesn't gamble on brilliance. It plans for exhaustion. Bayerlein thinks of German replacements arriving with weeks of training, of captured trucks cannibalized for parts, of fuel drums buried in the desert and forgotten during sudden retreats. He thinks of how often German officers have said, "If only we had more fuel." The Americans don't say that. They ask where to send it. An unsettling thought creeps in. If this Jeep is standard issue, then losing one doesn't matter. If a battalion loses 10, replacements arrive. If a division loses hundreds, more roll-off ships onto trucks, down roads already mapped, already supplied, already defended by aircraft overhead. War, Bayerlein realizes, is no longer a duel. It is a production contest, and Germany is running out of time. He recalls conversations back in Europe, officers scoffing at American soldiers as soft, untested, obsessed with comfort, a nation of shopkeepers, some had said. But shopkeepers understand inventory. They understand supply and demand. They understand that a system that never stops delivering will eventually crush one that relies on improvisation and sacrifice. Outside, engines rumble as German units pull back again. Headlights are taped down to slits. Fuel gauges hover near empty. Inside the tent, the captured radio crackles faintly. Still powered, still functional, still connected. Bayerlein reaches out and switches it off. The silence that follows feels heavier than gunfire. He does not voice his thoughts. Not yet. In the German army, doubt is dangerous. Defeatism is fatal. But in that quiet moment, surrounded by the spoils of a single captured Jeep, a line is crossed in his mind. This war will not be decided by the next battle, or the next one after that. It will be decided by who can keep fighting when everyone else is empty. And Germany is already counting what little it has left. Bayerlein steps outside. The North African sky is clear, stars sharp and distant. Somewhere beyond the horizon, American convoys are moving. Trucks, tanks, fuel, food, ammunition, all flowing forward like a tide that does not care how brave you are. Only whether you can withstand it. He exhales slowly, because for the first time, he understands something that cannot be fixed with better tactics or harder orders. You cannot outfight an enemy who never runs out, and you cannot stop a system once it's fully in motion. Behind him, the captured jeep sits quietly in the dark. Small, unarmored, insignificant, and more dangerous than any tank he has faced so far. The retreat accelerates overnight. By dawn, Bayerlein is riding in a commandeered truck. Not a staff vehicle, not even a proper transport. Its suspension groans with every rut. The fuel gauge needle trembles just above empty, as if unsure whether to keep pretending. Around him, the German front is dissolving into fragments. A column of infantry trudges past, boots caked in dust, faces hollow. An artillery battery sits abandoned by the roadside, guns intact but useless. No shells. A half-track burns quietly in a shallow ditch, its crew long gone. There is no single catastrophe, just erosion. This is how armies die when supply fails, not with drama, but with attrition. Bayerlein watches it unfold with new eyes now. Every breakdown, every abandoned vehicle, every delayed order traces back to the same invisible enemy. Logistics. He remembers how the Africa Corps once dazzled the world. Rommel's bold thrusts, lightning advances that humiliated British forces time and again. Speed had been their weapon, surprise their shield. But speed consumes fuel, and surprise means nothing when the enemy can replace losses faster than you can exploit victory. They stop near a crossroads marked by a splintered signpost. Officers argue quietly over maps spread on a hood. The lines are outdated already. American units are moving faster than reports can track. Bayerlein points toward a ridge in the distance. "We pull back there," he says, "if we can." If the word hangs in the air, a runner arrives, breathless, dust-coated. Allied fighter bombers have been spotted again, low altitude, strafing roads, targeting anything that moves. The general looks up instinctively. The sky is empty. But that means nothing anymore. The Americans don't need to see you to reach you. Their aircraft operate as part of the same system as that jeep, guided by radios, supplied with fuel, coordinated with ground units who can call them in with a few words. The Germans have aircraft too, skilled pilots, brave men. But too few planes, too little fuel, too many losses that cannot be replaced. By mid-morning, the bombing begins. It is not indiscriminate, it is precise. Trucks, fuel carriers, command vehicles. The arteries. Bayerlein dives for cover as machine gun rounds chew into the road. Dirt and stone erupt around him. Somewhere nearby, an ammunition truck explodes with a thunderous crack. When the dust settles, silence returns, broken only by fires and distant engines. The Americans are already gone. They always are. Later, in a temporary headquarters carved into a dry wadi, Bayerlein studies a new map. This one is German, hand-annotated, edges frayed, smudged with sweat and dirt. He compares it almost unconsciously to the captured American map from the jeep. That one had been clean, clear, confident. This one is desperate. Messages arrive piecemeal, units missing, requests unanswered, fuel promised but never delivered. Every order he issues feels conditional now. Advance if fuel arrives. Hold if artillery has shells. Withdraw if the road is not already cut. The war has become a series of ifs. A staff officer breaks the silence. "Herr General, Berlin is asking for an assessment." Bayerlein looks up. "An assessment?" He almost laughs. What do you tell a leadership that still believes in miracle weapons and last-minute reversals? That still thinks willpower can substitute for oil? He thinks of the jeep again, of how effortlessly it had carried everything a small unit needed to function, of how many thousands like it must already be pouring into Africa, Italy, and soon, France. He chooses his words carefully. "We are facing an enemy whose strength does not diminish with losses," he says slowly. "Ours does." The officer nods, writing it down. Whether anyone in Berlin will listen is another matter. As the day wears on, Bayerlein walks through a field hospital. Wounded men lie on stretchers under canvas, medics working with what little they have. Bandages are reused. Morphine is rationed. The contrast is brutal. He has heard reports. American field hospitals with refrigeration, plasma, blood supplies flown in, wounded evacuated within hours. Another system. Another advantage. A war designed to preserve fighting strength rather than spend it. That night, Bayerlein sits alone, writing by lamplight. His notes are precise, professional, stripped of emotion. But beneath the words lies a conclusion he cannot escape. Germany is not losing because its soldiers are inferior. It is losing because the modern world has outgrown the way it fights war. The Americans have turned conflict into an industrial process, one that absorbs shock, replaces losses, and keeps advancing. You can disrupt it. You can slow it. But you cannot stop it unless you can match it. And Germany no longer can. Outside, engines start again. Another withdrawal, another line erased. Bayerlein folds his papers and extinguishes the lamp. In the darkness, the realization sharpens. The Jeep was not an anomaly. It was the baseline. And the deeper the war goes, the more that baseline will crush everything built on improvisation and scarcity. Tomorrow he will be captured. But even now, before that moment arrives, he already knows what his interrogators will never need to force from him. The outcome is no longer in doubt. Only the cost remains. March 26, 1943, outside Beja, Tunisia, early morning. The fog clings low to the ground, dulling sound and flattening distance. Visibility is poor, a gray veil that turns every shape into a threat. Bayerlein's convoy moves slowly, cautiously, like a wounded animal testing each step. There are fewer vehicles now. Some were destroyed, some abandoned, some simply ran dry and were left behind with their crews. Fuel decides everything. A burst of gunfire crackles from ahead. The lead truck brakes hard. Men spill into ditches, rifles raised. Orders are shouted, then swallowed by the fog. Moments later, American infantry emerges from the haze, calm, disciplined, weapons steady. No panic, no rush. This is not an ambush born of chance. It is interception. Bayerlein stands, adjusts his cap, and steps forward. The war, for him, ends not with chaos, but with a quiet formality. An American officer approaches, a captain, young, mud on his boots, radio operator at his side. The radio, always the radio. "Sir," the captain says, respectful but firm, "you are my prisoner." Bayerlein nods. He hands over his pistol. As they escort him away, he watches the American unit move. Their spacing, their coordination. A jeep idles nearby, another one, engine running smoothly, antenna swaying gently. It is identical to the first, standardized, replaceable, unremarkable. He is taken to a temporary command post. Coffee is offered, real coffee, hot. A map is spread out on a table, American markings, clear, current, confident. An intelligence officer begins the formalities. Name, rank, unit. Bayerlein answers without hesitation. Then comes the question. It is not shouted, not threatening. Just curious. "General," the officer says, "when did you realize the war was turning against Germany?" Bayerlein pauses. For a moment he considers giving a conventional answer. Stalingrad, El Alamein, the loss of air superiority. All true, all incomplete. He looks past the officer through the tent opening where trucks move along a dirt road in a steady, unbroken flow. Fuel, ammo, food, men, the system in motion. "I realized it," he says slowly, "when I captured an American jeep." The officers exchange glances, surprised. He continues, "It was not special, it was not guarded, it was not rare. It carried everything its soldiers needed, maps, radio, fuel, food, and I understood that if this was ordinary, then defeat was inevitable." Silence, because there is no rebuttal to that. No argument that bravery or experience can make up for a war fought by an entire industrial civilization. Later in captivity, Bayerlein will observe more. American camps with abundant supplies, training centers operating without interruption, new units forming even as others fight overseas. He will note it all with the same clarity that first struck him in Tunisia. The jeep was the clue, the rest only confirmed it. As the day progresses, the front collapses further east. Thousands of Axis troops will surrender in the weeks to come. North Africa will be lost. But the true turning point, Bayerlein understands now, came earlier, not in a grand battle, but on a dusty road beside a stalled jeep. A small moment, a massive truth. The war had become something Germany could no longer win, because it was no longer just a contest of armies. It was a contest of systems, and only one side could sustain it. Bayerlein's captivity begins quietly. No chains, no shouting, just orders followed by logistics. Transport arranged, paperwork processed, meals delivered on schedule. Even as a prisoner, he moves through a system that functions with unnerving smoothness. He notices everything. The trucks arrive when expected. The guards rotate on time. Radios crackle with updates that actually matter. Supplies don't vanish between depots and front lines. War, even in defeat, is being administered efficiently. Weeks later, in a POW camp far from Tunisia, Bayerlein sits at a rough wooden table with other captured officers. The talk is subdued now, less bravado, fewer fantasies of reversal. They compare notes. France, Russia, Africa, different fronts, same pattern. American units never seem isolated. If cut off, they are resupplied. If damaged, they are rebuilt. If defeated locally, they return stronger. Someone mentions the factories, Detroit, Pittsburgh, the shipyards along the coasts. Liberty ships launched faster than U-boats can sink them, aircraft rolling off assembly lines by the thousands. Bayerlein says nothing. He does not need to. The Jeep has already explained it all. In interrogations, he speaks frankly, not out of bitterness, but out of professional respect. He explains German strengths and weaknesses without illusion. The Americans listen closely. They already know their advantage. It is not arrogance, it is design. Years later, after the war, Bayerlein will write and speak about these experiences. He will command a division in Normandy, fight again, lose again. And each time the lesson repeats. In France, he will watch American columns advance after air power pulverizes German supply lines. In Normandy's hedgerows, he will face soldiers supported by radios, artillery, fuel, and replacements that seem inexhaustible. The system expanded, refined, unstoppable. The Jeep returns again and again in his memory, not as a symbol of defeat, but as a warning about modern war. Wars are no longer won by genius alone. They are won by preparation that never sleeps, by logistics that never falter, by societies that mobilize not just soldiers, but everything behind them. The German army had been brilliant, but brilliance cannot substitute for endurance. In the end, Bayerlein understands the war was decided long before the final shots were fired. It was decided in factories, rail yards, oil fields, and shipyards, places far from any battlefield. The Jeep was merely the messenger, small, unarmored, carrying the weight of an entire industrial world. And when Bayerlein first looked inside it, on a dusty Tunisian road, he did not just see equipment. He saw the future of warfare, a future Germany could not survive.